Today's show is part one of a two-part conversation with my guest, Damon West. I have interviewed hundreds of people over the last nearly 15 years, and I have to say that Damon's is one of the most dynamic stories I've ever had the privilege of sharing with you. There was no way to get it done in one episode, so we're splitting it into two. He is a world-renowned speaker and best-selling author of the books The Change Agent and this one here, The Coffee Bean. He'll tell you all about what it means to be a coffee bean. It's such good stuff. You won't want to miss it. Thank you so much for being here, Damon. I am really excited to talk to you. Thanks for being here.
Lisa, thanks so much for having me. And thank you for your grace today, because I missed the entire appointment that we were supposed to have. And it was on me. And, in my program recovery that I work, I'm in AA. I work a 12-step program recovery. And part of that program recovery says we have to just own our behaviors and make an amends. And that's the best we can do. When you make an amends, though, there's not a guarantee that someone's going to accept your apology. That's the thing that some people forget. Like the making the apology, the onus is on you, but no one has to accept it. But not only did you accept it, you were graceful. You gave me another time that I could reach back out to you and record this today. So thank you for your grace. I truly appreciate it.
Well, I absolutely accept your apology. So thank you for, thanks for showing back up. I know you're a busy guy. Like I said, I've heard your story and I've read your story. I have a copy of your book. A friend of mine has a stack of them and she gives them to us, her friends.
It's so cool. I still can't believe that. When I hear people say that, I'm just a little kid from Port Arthur, Texas. But yeah, it's so wild.
Well, what I love about her gifting these is, I'm an author as well. And all I care about is that the message gets out there. But at the same time, when someone actually buys your book and gives it to someone instead of loaning it 9 times or something, then it's good because they can keep the hands. And I've got yours all marked up in all the places. So it's just mine. I wanted to start off. Let's just start from a bit of the beginning. You were raised by parents who loved you and cared for. And at some point, you took a different path. So let's start there.
Yeah, I came from a great family. I tell people all the time, I had it all. I had every advantage, every opportunity, every privilege over other people. I was a very privileged person growing up, Lisa. I came from a 2-parent home. My parents are still married. They're still alive. Been married for 54 years. So I didn't come from a broken home or split home. A house full of love and everything else in it that a kid needs to grow and be healthy. And I was a good kid by some measurements. I mean, I was a good student. I was smart. I was a great athlete, very good athlete. God blessed me to be a tremendous athlete. And I would be a 3-year starting quarterback for a 5A school in Texas, which 5A was the biggest division back then. And then a scholarship.
Football in Texas it's
a religion. It's like
very
serious. I mean, like people that aren't from Texas, like, let me tell you something, Texas high school football on Friday nights, that's all that's going on in every town in Texas. It's a very serious thing. And my football skills were good enough to earn me a scholarship to the University of North Texas to play Division I college football. But as I was growing up in the town of Port Arthur, Texas, I got into substance abuse at a really young age. I go back to this event that happened in my life when I was 9. I was molested by a babysitter, a female babysitter. And I always want to make sure people understand how this affected me, because there's some people that are really, really traumatized by molestation. And mine was a little different. Mine wasn't so much like, oh my God, this happened and it destroyed my life. Mine was more like this event happened. And what it did is it opened up doors that no 9-year-old needs to be in the other rooms of. Right. It's like there's a big giant door that only adults can go through, right? But someone let me into that door as a little kid. And then you get on the other side of the door, that big door that's bolted down and locked because you don't have a key as a kid, but some adult lets you in. And on the other side of the door, there's all these little doors, but they're flung open. There's no locks on these doors because it's an adult access.
And you're not equipped. You're not even prepared to go through the first door.
You got sex, you got drugs, you got drinking, you got all these different things. And I'm walking through these doors as a 9, 10-year-old little boy. So when I was 10, the door I go through is alcohol. I get in my dad's beer for the first time. That's my drug. That's the first drug I get into. Alcohol. When I was 12, I started smoking pot. I was skipping school. I had a lot of behavior issues, but remember, I could throw a football, and this is Texas. That counts for something.
Do you think at that point there would have been anything your parents could have done to turn you back to the course they had you on?
So they did. They sent me to counseling. They sent me to talk to a family priest. We prayed a lot. I mean, God was at the center of everything in our home. My mom is this devout Catholic woman. She's got crosses everywhere and prayer plaques on the wall. But the behaviors that I was exhibiting, I didn't show them those behaviors. I hid those behaviors. And that's what we do a lot of times when we know we're into behaviors that are not right, when we have bad belief systems like I had. You had that from the people that would tell you that, hey, that's not the right way to be. So they had really no clue that I was into a lot of these behaviors.
That makes sense.
I hid it from them. But had they known, they would have definitely do something. I mean, because they were great parents, wonderful parents, as you'll hear from the rest of the story. They would do anything for me, as a matter of fact. But I went to college. I was a really good athlete. By the time I was 20, I took over the starting quarterback job. And I thought, I was living the dream. My identity was wrapped up in being a football player. I was playing Division I college football in Texas. But I came to a fork in the road on September 21st, 1996, against the Texas A&M Aggies, which I understand that you are a Texas A&M Aggie.
I am.
So September 21st, 96, we took the field against A&M. And this is A&M. This is, the football atmosphere. Little boys that play football in Texas, they either want to play for these guys or play against them. And there I was, driving my team down Kyle Field. Third play of the game, I'll go down with a career and an injury. Never played college football again after that. And when I get up to this fork in the road in life and football was gone, I made a lot of wrong turns. I got into hardcore drugs, got into cocaine, ecstasy pills. I could not live life on life's terms because my identity was so wrapped up in that college football player that I couldn't find out who I was without football being attached to it. And I was lost. Right. And I was a very functional addict when I got into drugs.
That's what I was going to say. You managed to keep your grades up to that point. You managed to actually show up for practice and do all it requires. Sort of.
Grades up is a relative term. I barely graduated college with my bachelor's. Now my master's later on in life, decades later, I got a 4.0, but my bachelor's degree, Lisa, this is like, and I've never really got into this with anybody, told them. My grades were so bad. I graduated with a 2.28 GPA. Now you got to have a 2.25 to graduate from college. 2.28 is what I graduated with. And I took in the last semester of school, I took 21 hours that last semester, and I was trying to bolster this GPA and get it up out of there. And in the summertime, I took another 15 hours. So I took, almost 40 hours right when I was getting out, because I wanted to be out when I was 23. And I graduated in August of 99 with a 2.28 with a sociology degree. So I barely made it out of college, barely. But that also was something that my parents didn't know about. The report cards didn't go to their house. They came to my fraternity house where I lived and partied and basically hid from reality in that life because I wasn't dealing with life on life's terms. But I got a job right after college. I was working I worked in Congress, worked in the United States Congress. After that, I worked for a guy running for president. 2004, I was back in Dallas training to be a stockbroker for one of the biggest Wall Street banks in the world. It was at that job as a broker in 2004 when another stockbroker introduced me to meth for the first time. Wow. And Lisa, the first hit of this drug, I was instantly hooked, just like that. And I could not give everything away fast enough because that's what addicts do. We give things away. I tell people all the time. Of
yourself, just of any dream you had for yourself, everything's
that's
stripped away in that moment.
That's it, because that's what addicts do. I tell people all the time, addicts, and not just addicts to drugs and alcohol, food, money, sex, gambling, internet, Instagram, whatever it is you're addicted to. This is how you know if you're an addict. Addicts give up their goals to meet their behaviors. Addicts give up goals to meet behaviors. Normal people and successful and focused people, they give up behaviors to meet their goals.
Yeah.
But an addict can't do that. Addicts have a three-part thought process. We have a thought that then becomes an obsession, that then becomes physical. We do whatever it is that we obsess about. And once I was introduced to meth, it took over all the thoughts in my mind, took over an obsession, physically hooked. 18 months later, I was homeless. I burned through all my money, my savings account, evicted from my apartment, car was repossessed. So I'm homeless. I'm living on the streets of Dallas, and I started committing crimes. I was a petty criminal at first, shoplifting, breaking into cars. Just to feed the
habit. So you weren't trying to find a home. You were just trying to keep.
I ditched a lot of Maslow's hierarchy of needs
for
the need to get high. And that's what addicts do. And so But then the crimes escalated and I started breaking into people's homes. And this is the crime of burglary. And whenever I broke into these people's homes, my victims, Lisa, I didn't just steal their property. I stole their sense of security. And I found that out at my trial later on, how much pain I caused. And none of my crimes was anybody ever physically hurt. I never physically hurt anybody. No one was ever home. No weapons were ever used. No one got hurt. But the Dallas
when you're
SWAT
going
team
through this process and you're now at the point where you're breaking into homes to feed your habit, you're so far removed from the way you were raised or what your parents would want for you. You're even far removed from just trying to get through college, because that was a whole other life then. Now you're in this life that you have no, again, a door you open that you don't know how to get out of.
Yeah. And I'm so deep into this room that I've gone into. There was a day in there when I was, it was in the dope world, breaking into houses and stuff. And I looked at my phone one day and I looked at the phone book of my phone, and I used to have numbers of senators, congressmen, chief of staffs, bankers, lawyers, pillars of society, even, former chiefs of staff for presidents of the United States. But I looked at my phone that day and I remember looking at, dope dealers, other dope fiends, other people from the dope world, people I would fence stolen stuff off to. A lot of criminal elements were in my phone. And I remember thinking to myself, like, damn, Damon, what happened to you, But that's the world of addiction. Even though I can see this, I can actually see evidence of where I've gone in life because my phone book shows me who I am and who I hang out with. It didn't matter. I couldn't stop. I wasn't going to stop.
And you are who you hang out with. We know this now.
You are. Yeah, show me who you hang out with. I can tell you who you are. And that's the truth. And my parents, they knew something was wrong, but I would just lie to them. I'd tell them I had different jobs. I was a limo driver one time, I told them. And, they even sent a family friend to have an intervention with me, but I didn't show up for the intervention. This is like in 2007. But in 2008, July 30th, 2008 to be exact, the Dallas SWAT team finally got me. They crashed into this apartment that I was in, just this huge SWAT team raid, cops everywhere, coming through the windows, busting down the doors. And they took me into custody that day, and they set my bond at $1.4 million.
Wow.
Because they had the Uptown burglar. And that's what they called me.
So you weren't just one random burglar. You were getting really good at what you do.
I was the ringleader of a crew of other burglars. Yeah, no, and wow. I was the head of. I was the mastermind of this burglary ring of about a dozen other people, young and old, male and female, black and white, and everything in between. Because drugs and addiction don't discriminate, So we just looks like the burglary crew looks like the rest of America, because that's what addiction is. It affects everybody the same way. But when they got me into custody, they set my bond really high. I remember calling home from jail, and my dad was broken up. He was crying on the phone. My mom gets on the phone. My mom's a very, very tough woman. She's a nurse. She's used to traumatic situations. She can compartmentalize pain. And she told me, she's like, Damon, your dad can't talk, but we need to have a conversation. You need to understand that we love you unconditionally. There's nothing we would do. There's nothing you could ever do to make us not love you. She said, that was the deal we made with God when he loaned you to us. She said, do you understand what I'm saying? I'm like, yeah, Mom, I got it. And she said, that's good, baby, because we just gave you back to God. She said, there's nothing we can do for you. She said, you are now
in the
captive audience to God. Yeah. She said, you're now a captive audience to God. You better start listening to him. And, but she tells me, she reminds me that they love me. And she's telling me to get on God's back, like in Footprints of the Sand. I wait for my day in court. It takes about 10 months, and they finally take me to trial, May 18th, 2009. Day I'll never forget. I'm standing in front of this jury in Dallas, and the jury has just listened to a 6-day criminal trial. 6 days is a long trial, Lisa, for crimes that were non-aggravated, meaning no one was ever home, didn't hurt my victims. But at the end of that 6-day trial, the jury went to deliberate for 10 minutes on my punishment. They hated my guts.
Did you know you were in trouble when it was that short?
Absolutely. In fact, to confirm that I was in trouble, they let you go on a recess while the jury goes into the jury room, and they take you as a prisoner. They take you to a holding cell, and they give you these bologna sandwiches to eat. That's what you do on your break. You eat your little bologna sandwich for lunch. And I remember I just started taking my bite out of my bologna sandwich, and the bailiff came back to the door of the cell, and he said, they're ready for you. They've made a decision. And my throat tightened up. I couldn't even swallow the sandwich. I spit the sandwich out the toilet that was in the cell. I'm like, oh my God. I walked back in the courtroom. I've got 2 paid attorneys, Lisa. I thought I was going home. I thought I was gonna get probation. White, middle-class guy.
Did they think that? Did your attorneys tell you you're probably gonna get out of this?
Man, I had two attorneys. The main attorney, this guy named Ed Siegel. Ed was like, yeah, this isn't a criminal trial. This isn't an organized crime trial. This is really a burglary trial. I'm like, Ed, they just charged me with organized crime. They think it's organized crime, which is a more severe punishment. Ed wasn't really that good of an attorney, but I wasn't that good of a defendant either. I was a terrible client to have because I was guilty of everything they said. The evidence was overwhelming. And I knew I was going to go to prison at this point, whenever the trial was over. But going into it.
How long were you incarcerated before the trial? Because at this point, you don't have, how long?
10 months.
10 months.
10
so
months
you're not using drugs at that point then?
No, my sobriety date is my arrest date. I mean, I've got the Dallas SWAT team took me into sobriety at gunpoint. So,
yeah.
But I was trying in Dallas County Jail. I was trying to find meth. I was trying to find drugs. I wanted to get high in there so bad, but I could never find meth while I was in county jail. But it wasn't from a lack of trying.
Lack of effort, yeah.
But when I came back into the courtroom, my second chair counsel, a woman named Karen Lambert, who was a very good lawyer, Karen looked at me and she said, brace yourself, this is going to be bad. And I'm like, how bad, Karen? She said, well, you were gone for that brief 10 minutes. The jury sent a note into the judge. They wanted to know if they could give you life without parole. Life without parole is a capital punishment, Lisa.
So they just walked into that room and they had all made up their mind.
Yeah, they had their minds made up. Now that's what the 10-minute wait was. I mean, 10-minute wait was just
finding out if they could.
If they could give me life without parole, which is the most serious punishment there. That punishment is reserved for people that kill other people in the commission of a crime. Mm-hmm. No one was ever home. These are property crimes around meth. But Karen said, get ready. It's going to be bad. And so the judge called the court back into session. He read the verdict out loud. Damon Joseph West, you are hereby sentenced to 65 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. 65 years is a life sentence, Lisa. The jury gave me life. Yeah. And man, it took my breath away. The sheriff was on me. The bailiff was on me. They're handcuffing me. They're dragging me out of the courtroom.
And your parents are there?
I locked eyes with my mom on the way out. And my mom and my dad on the front row. I'm like, Mom, I'm sorry. They whisked me out of there. They put me in this little side room. It's got a bulletproof glass. They told me to wait. A few minutes later, my mom and my dad were being escorted in the other side of the glass. They've decided to give my parents one last visit with me before I go to prison. They feel sorry for my parents because I just got life. So my dad, he can't even talk. He's in stunned disbelief that his son, with all this promise in life, just got a life sentence in prison. So my mom, she does all the talking. She tells me, she's like, debts in life demand to be paid. And you just got hit with one hell of a bill from the state of Texas. But you did everything they said you did. So you're going to pay that debt to society. You owe Texas that debt.
Your mom is in this moment still teaching you, still mothering you.
Yes.
Trying to impart like this last bit of lesson.
Absolutely.
I'm in awe of her.
I'll give you a precursor, a teaser to what my mom's about to say for your audience. I've gone back and asked my mom in that moment, what were you thinking? What was your thought process when you're telling me this right after the trial? And she's a nurse. She reverts it back. Everything goes back to medical. She says, Damon, I'm envisioning my son laying on a gurney, dying, bleeding out. And she said, I've got to stem the flow, but I've got to do triage at this moment. I'm not trying to do anything like, we don't have time to do this clean and take our time with it. This is stem the flow of blood, or you're going to die. And I'm losing my son. I'm watching him die, bleeding out on the gurney. And that's the mindset she has when she tells me, she said, but you owe Texas the debt for the things you did in that courtroom. You owe your father and I a different debt. She said, we gave you all the opportunities, love and support to be anything you wanted to be in life. And that's how you just repaid us. What we saw in that courtroom, that's not going to work. We raised you in Port Arthur, Texas, a giant melting pot of a city, gave you a great moral compass, which you chose to not use. She said, so here's the debt you're going to pay to us. When you go to prison, you will not get in one of these white hate groups, one of these Aryan Brotherhood type of gangs, because you're scared because you're the minority in there. She said, that's not going to work. You were never raised to be a racist, and you're not going to start now. She said, you will not get any tattoos while you're inside that prison. No gangs, no tattoos. She said, you come back as the man we raised, or don't come back at all. And I'm like floored. I'm like, and she said, do you understand this debt you're going to pay to us? And I was like, yeah, Mom, I got it. But Lisa, man, I didn't I didn't know what I was getting into. I mean, what do I know about prison? I'm a white middle-class guy in
And what did
America.
your mom know about prison? I mean, I guess she'd probably, in her line
Watching
of
stuff
work,
on
she
TV.
probably saw some scary things, but really,
You know, I tell people all the time when I'm doing my presentations, my mom loves prison shows. I mean, people love stories about prison.
right.
When I first got out of prison, just fast forward, whenever I made parole and I got out, I lived with my parents for the first 2 years I was out on parole. And I mean, the first month I'm there, she's calling me in the living room night. Hey, watch this on TV with me, Damon. And it's like, it's locked up. It's 60 days in.
You're like, no thanks.
So that's where she probably got her education about what prison was like. So, but yeah, so I didn't know what I'd promised her because, you know, I'd never been to prison. I don't know anybody's been to prison at this point, really, you know, so I'm
What's
back
interesting too is what when she said to you, you know, come back as we raise you or don't come back at all. In that moment, she still had hope you'd come back.
Yes.
65 years is a long time, but she had hope you'd be back.
This is the word you just used. The word you used is important, hope.
Mm-hmm.
You have to have hope because when you live a life that's void of hope, well, it's an abyss. It's dark. There's nothing good that comes from a life of hope. Or if you put your hope in the wrong things and you start thinking hope is a bad thing. The movie Shawshank. Have you ever seen the movie Shawshank Redemption?
Oh yeah, a couple of times.
So I ask people all the time, when you watch Shawshank, do you think it's a story about Red, Morgan Freeman's character, or a story about Andy, you know, Tim Robbins' character? And there's no right or wrong answer, but I think it's a story about Red. I think it's Red's story. Even though Red is narrating it and he's talking about Andy the whole time, it's Red's story, I think, because Red has given up hope. Red gave up on life. Red is dead when he meets Andy. And Andy brings Red back to life. Whenever Brooks gets out of prison and he goes and he can only handle it for a couple of weeks and he hangs himself and he writes that letter back to the guys that are there, Red tells Andy, I'm an institutional man, Andy. I don't know if I could do it. I don't think I can't do it up there. He even tells Andy, hope is a dangerous thing. Imagine living in a world where you think hope is a dangerous thing.
Cannot.
But Andy tells Red, get busy living or get busy dying. Red is telling the story about the guy that saved his life. That's what I think Shawshank is about. It's Red's story. But she still got hope, which is more than what I have at this point, because everybody I'm talking to in Dallas County Jail, I'm waiting the prison transport to come pick me up. It takes about 2 months. And every guy I'm talking to that's been to prison before, they're telling me the same thing. I have to get into a gang. I can't survive without a gang. Go into the worst part of prison because everywhere I go, I live with the lifers, and the life sentence building is the worst part of prison.
Yeah.
But there was this old black man in county jail named Mr. Jackson, and Mr. Jackson, well, he was like an angel. I mean, he's a real guy. I mean, no doubt he's a real guy, but you know, I think in my life, God, and this happens to a lot of people, I'm sure, God has never reached his hand down on my head and said, Damon, you're healed. God has always put people in my life, and these people took on the forms of different people. My parents were those people at one point, my coaches, my teachers, the people that helped raise me in Port Arthur. Later in life, one of them was a black Muslim man in Dallas County Jail that shared with me one day how I was going to survive this. And he told me to imagine prison as a pot of boiling water. And he said, you have 3 choices of how you're going to respond to this pot of boiling water called prison. He told me you could be like the carrot that turns soft and mushy and sad and weak, or you can be like the egg that turns hard and mad and mean. The inside of the egg becomes hardened. Your heart becomes hardened when you're an egg. He said, or you can choose to be like the coffee bean, because the coffee bean changes the pot of boiling water into a pot of coffee. And he said the coffee bean is the only thing that can change the water of the 3 things. The carrots are changed by the water. The eggs are changed by the water. But the coffee bean changes the water because it is a change agent. It is the activating force that changes everything because the power is inside the coffee bean. And the last words he ever tells me before the prison bus comes to pick me up, be a coffee bean.